In the early 1960s, the world was locked in a staring contest. The United States and the Soviet Union possessed enough nuclear yield to end human history, operating in a constant, high-stakes standoff over the planet. Against that backdrop of global titans stood Lee Harvey Oswald. He was a 20-year-old former Marine who traveled to the Soviet Union, hoping to defect and find a place of importance inside a communist utopia. After Soviet officials initially denied his citizenship application, Oswald slashed his left wrist in a Moscow hotel bathtub. He reacted to bureaucratic rejection with life-or-death desperation. He eventually returned to the United States, but found no glory there either. Oswald drifted through low-wage jobs, sweeping floors and greasing machines for $1.25 an hour. He was completely invisible, living on the absolute margins of society. While Oswald was struggling to hold down a job, the Kennedy administration authorized a covert invasion of Cuba at the Bay of Pigs. It was a complete disaster. Within 3 days, Fidel Castro's military crushed the U.S.-backed exile forces, capturing over 1,000 prisoners. For most Americans, the failed invasion was a humbling foreign policy defeat. Oswald processed it differently. He viewed the American aggression as an imperialist crime against the only political system he still romanticized. Fidel Castro became his ultimate icon. Here was a leader successfully defying the American government 90 miles from Florida. To Oswald, the Cuban Revolution represented the purity he failed to find in the Soviet Union. An isolated man with no power, money, or prospects had tethered his sense of self-worth to the most volatile geopolitical conflict on the planet. By the spring of 1963, Oswald needed to prove his revolutionary credentials. He bought a rifle through the mail and took a shot in the dark at retired Major General Edwin Walker, a prominent right-wing anti-communist figure in Dallas. He missed, and the crime went unsolved. Fleeing the pressure of Dallas, Oswald moved to New Orleans. He decided to manufacture a public persona as a radical leader. He printed up handbills and established a local chapter of the pro-Castro Fair Play for Cuba Committee. But there were no other members. He was the president, the secretary, and the sole recruit, standing on street corners handing out pamphlets by himself. Analyzing this document, the Warren Commission document identifies those activities as an attempt to structure a world of fantasy in which he was important. His marriage was falling apart, and he couldn't hold down work, so he played the part of a revolutionary. His street-level activism served as a desperate, one-way audition. He was building a resume of pro-Castro loyalty, hoping the Cuban government would eventually welcome him as a hero of the cause. In late September 1963, Oswald took a bus to Mexico City. He planned to visit the Cuban and Soviet embassies, secure an immediate transit visa, and finally cross into his ideological sanctuary. He walked into those embassies fully expecting to be recognized as an ally. He presented his New Orleans arrest record and newspaper clippings as proof of his dedication. This CIA intercept captures the reality. His frantic behavior made diplomats highly suspicious. Look closely at the routing notes, information passing through intelligence channels while Oswald gets nowhere. To a desperate man, bureaucratic red tape equated to a hostile denial. Oswald engaged in a shouting match with a Cuban consul and left in tears. The ultimate ideological homeland had slammed its doors shut, leaving him cornered, rejected, and stripped of his blueprint for the future. Oswald rode the bus back to Dallas, exhausted and depressed. With no alternate path forward, he returned to the obscurity he hated, taking a minimum-wage job filling book orders at the Texas School Book Depository. Since the revolution wouldn't accept his paperwork, he decided to force them to recognize his loyalty through an undeniable, spectacular act. At that exact moment, John F. Kennedy was navigating the geopolitical fallout of the Cuban Missile Crisis. As the most powerful man on Earth, he was attempting to manage a fragile global balance. While Oswald plotted vengeance for the Bay of Pigs, the Kennedy administration was actually exploring back-channel diplomatic communications with Fidel Castro, quietly looking for a way to ease tensions. Oswald was operating on a frozen, distorted narrative. He targeted a leader who was actively trying to de-escalate the very conflict Oswald was obsessed with. On November 22, 1963, the geopolitical macro level drove directly into Oswald's micro-level reality. The presidential motorcade turned into Dealey Plaza, passing right beneath his workplace window. From the 6th floor of the book depository, Oswald fired 3 shots. It was the ultimate horrific expression of a marginalized man forcing his way into the center of global history. Arrested hours later, Oswald finally achieved global infamy, but the communist regimes he killed for immediately distanced themselves, labeling him a disloyal, neurotic maniac. Ultimately, Dallas was the tragic culmination of a broken man's desperate quest to matter to a world that never even knew his name.